Welcome to week 3. This is a two-part lecture. Part 1 is on censorship, and it's in a separate file. This one is on the Dada movement and also anti-war art, and they do cross paths a lot. So this particular lecture will explore how artists responded to the devastation of war with rebellion, absurdity, and defiance. We'll begin by looking at how the horrors of World War I shattered conventional beliefs and gave rise to the anarchic spirit of the Dada movement. Dada was an anti-art movement born during World War I. It rejected logic, reason, and traditional aesthetics in response to the senseless violence of the time. Artists embraced absurdity, chance, and nonsense as a form of protest against nationalism, capitalism, and the establishment. Emerging in Zurich and spreading to Berlin, Paris, and New York, Dada laid the groundwork for later avant-garde and conceptual art movements. It's also one of the few art movements that impacted the world on a global level. You see factions of it in countries all over the planet. From Berlin to Zurich, artists used nonsense, chance, and protest to challenge everything from nationalism and to aesthetics itself. Later, we'll examine broader traditions of anti-war art across the 20th century and into the present day. Throughout, we'll ask, how can art protest the unspeakable? And is absurdity sometimes the most honest response to atrocity? Let's take a look. Marcel Duchamp's fountain might be the most infamous Dada gesture of all. It's an ordinary urinal signed R. Mutt and submitted to an art show. It was rejected, which only proved his point. By removing a mass-produced object from its usual context, Duchamp challenged the very definition of art. Fountain was not a protest against war directly, but it embodied the Dada spirit, absurd, provocative, and anti-authoritarian. In a world where reason led to trenches and gas attacks, maybe nonsense was the only sane response. Otto Dix, a German expressionist, served in the trenches of World War I and translated that experience into unflinching visual horror. His etching, "Stormtroopers Advance Under Gas," captures soldiers trudging forward in gas masks, ghostly and dehumanized. Dix refused to romanticize war. His gritty realism, often bordering on grotesque, was a powerful counter to heroic war memorials. For Dix, the truth of war lay in shattered bodies and psychological trauma rendered in sharp, unforgiving lines. Hannah Hoch pioneered photomontage as a sharp-edged tool of social critique. Cut with a Kitchen Knife is a chaotic collage of industrial machinery, politicians, performers, and fragments of text. The piece attacks patriarchal structures, it celebrates the modern woman, and it ridicules the Weimar political elite. Her use of domestic metaphors like the kitchen knife subverts traditional gender roles while slicing into the fabric of a society still recovering from war. It's Dada at its fiercest. It's humorous, anarchic, and definitely feminist. Artists from the Dada movement often incorporate the machine into their content for a number of reasons. It can represent anything from soulless humanity to mechanical and thoughtless actions. Here in Francis Picabia's Parade Amoureuse is a machine-like abstraction of a romantic entanglement. Gears, bolts, and levers replace human forms. Influenced by technical diagrams and the emerging fascination with mechanization, Picabia's Dada works mocked the cold logic of a world obsessed with industry, even in the face of death. This piece critiques how love, like war, can become mechanized, soulless, and absurd. Picabia fused humor and cynicism, delivering a blueprint of emotional detachment that fits squarely in the Dada ethos. John Hartfield weaponized photo montage against fascism. In Adolf the Superman, Hitler's chest is an X-ray revealing coins instead of a heart, implying that industrialists and financial backers truly controlled him. Hartfield's images were printed in magazines and posted in public spaces, merging fine art with graphic protest. He transformed Dada's absurdity into targeted resistance, proving that cut-and-paste imagery could indeed carry explosive political weight. In 2016, a provocative artist collective called In Decline installed life-size nude statues of Donald Trump in public spaces across 5 U.S. cities. Titled "The Emperor Has No Balls," the grotesque figures mocked Trump's ego, vanity, and authoritarian tendencies. These statues were intentionally crude, flabby, vein-pocked, and missing testicles, meant to humiliate rather than simply parody. This act of public disruption echoes Dadaist tactics from a century earlier: absurdity, shock, and ridicule as tools of political resistance. Like Dada's photo montages and street performances, these statues use satire to challenge the aesthetics of power and the cult of personality. The response was predictably polarized. Some laughed, others raged. Authorities quickly removed the statues, with New York's Park Department stating that NYC does not condone any unpermitted erection. The censorship only amplified the message, just as it did for Dada artists confronting authoritarian regimes a century earlier. Leon Galoub's work shares Dada's spirit of political resistance and anti-authoritarian critique. He produces massive, raw canvases that depict the ugly realities of state violence. In Interrogation 3, 2 men tower over a faceless prisoner cropped out of view. The psychological violence is palpable. Galoub sanded and scraped his surfaces to convey brutality, both physically and symbolically. He believed that painting could still speak truth in an era dominated by photography and media. His work asks, who holds power and what are they willing to do to keep it? Kathy Kollwitz lost her son in World War I. The Grieving Parents is her memorial, 2 figures bent in silent mourning, placed where he's buried. It's not a glorification of sacrifice, but an admission of unbearable loss. Kollwitz's work channels personal grief into universal empathy. Her Dada-era contemporaries screamed in protest. Kollwitz wept. But her sorrow is no less radical. It demands remembrance over forgetfulness, humanity over heroism. Peter Kennard's photo montage, Haywain with Cruise Missiles, overlays 18th century pastoral imagery with modern military hardware. It's a jarring collision of idyllic England and nuclear dread. Kennard revived Dadaist montage to critique Cold War policies and British militarism. He saw art as a tool for activism, not just aesthetics. By subverting familiar visuals, Kennard shocked viewers into reevaluating the status quo. Banksy's Rage the Flower Thrower shows a masked protester preparing to hurl a bouquet instead of a weapon. Painted on a wall in Bethlehem, it addresses themes of resistance, violence, and hope in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Banksy uses street art as a platform for protest, ensuring visibility in public spaces where it cannot be easily ignored or censored. The work's contrast between aggression and gentleness is key, transforming an act of violence into one of beauty and absurdity. This aligns with Dada's disruption of expectations and its use of irony to critique societal norms. Banksy's anonymity adds to his mystique, allowing the message to speak louder than the artist's identity. His art is a modern manifestation of anti-war protest, resonating with global audiences and continuing Dada's irreverent legacy. And Babies is a devastating poster created by the Art Workers Coalition in response to the My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War. It features a photograph of murdered civilians overlaid with a haunting question and response. And babies? And babies. This stark visual condemned the war and the complicity of institutions like the U.S. government and media. The poster was famously censored by the Museum of Modern Art shortly after its creation, sparking further debate about the role of museums in activism. The AWC's work was direct, brutal, and emotionally wrenching, hallmarks of effective protest art. Like Dada, it rejected traditional decorum in favor of blunt confrontation. And Babies remains one of the most iconic pieces of anti-war protest art ever produced. It's also automatically censored by Google and is blurred out if you try to look it up. Fernando Botero's Abu Ghraib series uses his signature rotund figures to depict scenes of torture and abuse by U.S. personnel in Iraq. The jarring mismatch between Botero's usual playful style and the horrific subject matter makes the work especially disturbing. Abu Ghraib shows a blindfolded prisoner in a vulnerable, exposed position, an image that draws from real photographs leaked to the public. Botero created over 80 works in this series, none of which were for sale. Instead, he saw them as a moral obligation, a way to document and bear witness to cruelty. This echoes Dada's use of art as moral resistance, rejecting apathy and challenging those in power. Botero's approach makes clear that even stylized or exaggerated forms can carry deep political weight. A. Weiwei's study of perspective, Tiananmen, is part of a provocative series in which he photographs his own middle finger aimed at powerful institutions. In this image, his defiance is directed towards Tiananmen Square, the site of the 1989 massacre. The gesture is deliberately irreverent, confronting the Chinese government's censorship and authoritarian control. By inserting his own body, specifically a rude gesture, into these iconic sites, A reclaims agency and invites viewers to question reverence and authority. His work bridges personal expression and global activism, and like the Dadaists, he resists aesthetic norms in favor of direct, confrontational statements. Weiwei's art is not just symbolic, it often leads to real-world consequences, including surveillance and imprisonment. This adds urgency and credibility to his protest, reminding us of the risks that artists still face when challenging power. In Cut Piece, former Fluxus artist Yoko Ono sat silently on stage while audience members were invited to cut away pieces of her clothing. The performance was a raw and powerful act of vulnerability, exploring themes of violence, gender, consent, and participation. Originally presented in 1964, Cut Piece became a feminist and pacifist statement, especially as Ono reprised it decades later in response to war and terrorism. The piece is nonverbal yet deeply confrontational, placing the burden of action on the viewer. Like Dada, it questioned the boundary between art and life and the role of the audience in shaping meaning. Ono's minimalism and quietude contrast with the chaos of Dada, but the spirit of resistance and experimentation remains. Her performance endures as a landmark in both performance art and anti-war expression. The Yes Men are activist pranksters who use media hoaxes to expose corporate malfeasance. In 2004, one of them impersonated a Dow Chemical spokesperson on BBC World, claiming responsibility for the Bhopal disaster and offering compensation. The stock price fell and Dow had to issue a denial. This absurdist intervention used lies to reveal truth, aligning with Dada's strategy of disorientation and disruption. The yes men used performance, media spectacle, and satire as political tools. By weaponizing the language of PR and corporate culture, they turned the system's tools against itself. Their tactics continue the Dadaist tradition of creative sabotage, mocking institutions to expose their failings. It's a reminder that protest can be both funny and effective, using absurdity to challenge the absurd. As we conclude this exploration of Dada and anti-war art, one thing becomes clear. Protest in art is as varied as it is vital. From the absurdities of Hugo Ball's sound poems to the wrenching grief in Kathy Kollwitz's sculpture and Goya's painting seen here, artists have long responded to violence not with silence, but with action. Dada rejected reason when reason led to war. Others, like AYY or the Yes Men, used humor and provocation to challenge power. These works don't merely express outrage, they ask us to confront it, to feel it, and to think critically about the systems that shape our world. In an age of disinformation, protest art continues to serve a unique role. It cuts through noise, tells emotional truths, and invites change. As artists, students, or citizens, our responsibility is not to just observe history, but to question it and challenge it.